Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Me's My Passion, YouTube's premier channel about all things women's football. And yes, as promised, here is the recap of match days 10 and 11. As if you recall, if you are a follower of this channel, if you just seen the post itself, I was unable to recap these matches due to some technical difficulties, but thankfully I finally got around to doing it. So without further ado, let's get started here. Now, I won't go into as much detail as I usually do with the other videos that I've done so far covering the matches of the Women's World Cup, but what I'll do in this one, I'll just quickly go over the matches themselves, and I'll do it group by group as a way to just make it easier to digest and look through. And obviously these are matches that have already transpired, and the matches that follow them have also transpired again. So hopefully with the insight that I do give you, you then get to appreciate how the shortcomings or the improvements by teams on the recap here that I'm giving you on match day 10 and 11 would eventually have ramifications for their final group matches. So without further ado, let's get started with Group G, of which the only game here was Sweden versus Italy, with both teams landing with 4-2-3-1 formation. Now, if you do recall the ending of this match, it ended 6-0 in favor of the Swedish team here, with Amanda Illich popping up with a brace, which makes her one of the top goal scorers at the Women's World Cup, and she's a defender. So more power to her there, and hopefully she can actually defy the odds and actually just win the Golden Boot. I mean, why not in this situation? But looking back on this match, there was a really bad sense of defending nous and prowess from the Italians here, which is something that did affect them in their final group game against South Africa here, where they lost 3-2. And I think looking back on this match, the Swedes are definitely now more astute than they were against South Africa, as seen in the game against Argentina as well. And I think they will be one of the better teams to look forward to watching in the knockout stages. And as I do believe that they're one of the most well-balanced teams around here. But I do think that if they were going to be paired up against a team like Japan, it would make things very interesting and enticing, because as you all know, Japan is a team that focuses mainly on counter-attacking football, and they're a very disciplined side. So it would be very interesting to see that matchup between Sweden and Japan, to see just really how Sweden would go about coping with a team like that, because I think if you put any other team in their way, Sweden will definitely find a way to navigate around that team, whether it's the Netherlands or hell, even the USA. But that was what I overall thought about the match here with Sweden versus Italy. I do think that Sweden, based on this performance and their next performance against Argentina, they're going to have a very good showing in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. And of course, Italy were knocked out of the Women's World Cup yesterday, so that is that when it comes to reviewing the long-term plans of the teams when it comes to the Women's World Cup at least. Now, the next match comes from Group F here, and it was Panama versus Jamaica. Panama lined up with a 5-4-1 formation, and Jamaica lined up with a 4-1-2-3 formation. And of course, this was the match that Bunny Shaw had missed due to a red card in the previous game against France. And of course, Jamaica would go on to win this match, but it was by a narrow 1-0 margin, thanks from a corner converted by Alison Swaby here. And I think this match was really even Stevens. Of course, Jamaica dominated as they were the stronger side going in, but Panama really did do themselves good and giving a good account of themselves, which eventually kind of yielded some sort of dividends, as we saw in the game against France, which they did manage to score 3 goals, even though they went on to lose 6-3 here. And for Jamaica, I think this match really showed the resilience that we witnessed in their game against France and also in the game against Brazil yesterday as well. So I think when it comes to looking at both of these teams, Panama do have a very long way to go in terms of being a very competitive side. I do think, given that they came to the World Cup here, it was a good sign and a good show that the country is moving forward and in a very positive direction when it comes to women's football. But now they need to have a lot of resources allocated so that they can continue to grow and become huge competitors and potentially big hitters, at least in the Caribbean region where they hail from. But this is just all rhetoric at this point, because we really don't know what's going to happen, what is the future of football in Panama. But hopefully, based on the performance of the women's team here, even though they lost all 3 of their group stage matches, hopefully the federation there of Panama can do their best to make sure that when it comes to the next World Cup in 2027, hopefully Panama will be there. They'll be a much better and much more competitive unit than the one that we got here in Australia and New Zealand. And then, of course, as for Jamaica, they have qualified for the knockouts here thanks to their 0-0 draw with Brazil. And hopefully for the Jamaicans, they can have a better account of themselves, because they're really good at sitting back and defending. But at the same time, I think they need to add some goals to their game. They can't solely rely on Bunny Shaw to provide the goals here. because going into knockouts, they're going to face some very stiff competition, and unfortunately, I do not believe that their current tactics in the group stages of the Women's World Cup will really do them any good. But other than that, that is Panama versus Jamaica, and coming up next is another Group F encounter. This time was France versus Brazil. And Les Bleus line up in a 4-1-2-3 formation, whereas As Canariñas line up in a 4-4-2 formation, and Marta again would be on the bench here, as this game was very tense, and I do think it would have gone either way. Of course, France ended up winning 2-1 here. France opened up the scoring through Eugénie Le Sommer, and Brazil would level in the second half thanks to an effort by Debinha from point blank range. And unfortunately, towards the end, Wendy Renard would put France up from a corner, which she took very, very well. Now, looking at this match here, again, I do think any team could have won this one. Could have gone either way in reality, and I think France were the better team when it came to getting the goals here. Otherwise, it would have really ended a draw, all things considered here. I think it was very unfortunate for Brazil, as they did have some very golden chances, such as in the 22nd minute where Adriana had a very golden opportunity at goal, but she skied her shot. And even in the 78th minute, Ramagna had a very good opportunity to set one of her teammates free on goal, but unfortunately, I think it was a little bit of selfishness that prevented her from doing that here. So I think Brazil, if things had gone their way and if some decisions had been made differently in that game, I do think they would have qualified ahead of France and Jamaica. But this is all hearsay now because it's already gone down. We already know who's advancing from this group. And for France here, I think this was the beginning of the cracks showing in their defense. I think also, yes, it's Brazil. It's a very strong opposition. But at the same time, now considering the way that Debinha's goal went in, it was a lot of poor organization at the back here. And that was something that Panama kind of took advantage from in yesterday's game. And I think that's definitely something that France's knockout opponents here are going to take advantage of to see just how poorly Renard's charges are doing in front of defense. But I think the presence of Wendy Renard will really help galvanize the team, and I think there's going to be zero room for error come the knockout stages, but we will see. And hopefully the defensive frailties can be shored up, otherwise France will be going home quite early in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. Up next we have Group A, and we begin with New Zealand versus Switzerland here, with Switzerland lining up in a 4-3-3 formation and New Zealand lining up in a 4-4-2 formation. And going into this match, New Zealand needed to win against the Swiss here to guarantee themselves a spot in the knockout stages, whereas Switzerland just needed a draw at the very least to get themselves through to the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. Now, this match eventually did end 0-0, and that would mean that New Zealand would be knocked out of the Women's World Cup. They'll become the first ever co-host, but in this case hosts for the terms of the record here, to be knocked out at the group stages of the Women's World Cup. And for Switzerland, it does mean that they did qualify for the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. And looking at this match, it is rather unfortunate that New Zealand didn't get to advance to the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, as throughout the entire group stage process of the Women's World Cup here, I feel like I'm saying the Women's World Cup a lot here. Take a shot every time you hear me say that. But New Zealand, they did improve over the course of this group stage here, seen in their win against Norway and their narrow loss against the Philippines. New Zealand were definitely one of the most entertaining teams, at least of the group stages here at the World Cup. But the fact that they were unable to unlock the defense of the Swiss women, there is definitely some room for improvement. But I think they're definitely going in the right direction with Petkova, especially as the coach here. They added goals to their game. They're still very astute when it comes to defensive actions here, because again, Switzerland is definitely a much tougher and more stronger side when in comparison to New Zealand. The fact that New Zealand itself was also able to keep Switzerland outside of the goal is a very positive sign here. So hopefully the football friends can get themselves back on a big stage through qualification, of course, and this time around when they go to the next Women's World Cup, fingers crossed, or the next continental competition of theirs, they can definitely give a good showing, because the current squad is very good, because it's filled with veterans but also very promising young talents like the likes of India Paige Riley, who can definitely take the team to new heights. So hopefully for the football friends, it is definitely something worthwhile to look into. And in this match, there was Switzerland, who continue to be the most underwhelming team of the tournament in my opinion, because I think for a team that has some very good talents with the likes of Bachmann being there, they haven't really done that much to assert themselves or to really show themselves that they belong with the other big teams here at the Women's World Cup. Of course, they do finish the group top, but unfortunately it was due to more pragmatism than anything else. So hopefully we do see a different side of Switzerland here in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. Otherwise, they will come against some very strong opposition, which I think will tear them apart limb from limb. But that's to be seen in the future encounter that Switzerland do have eventually. But otherwise, they continue to underwhelm me. I'm not really feeling Switzerland when it comes to watching their matches. So hopefully in the Women's World Cup knockout stages here, they can pick it up. But that's to be seen later on. The final Group A encounter saw Norway take on the Philippines, with Norway lined up to 4-1-2-3 formation and the Philippines lined up 4-4-2 formation. Philippines were coming off the back of their first ever Women's World Cup win against New Zealand, and Norway coming off another disappointing draw against Switzerland here. And of course, going into this game, Norway needed to win, same as the Philippines, in order to qualify for the knockout stages of the tournament here. And Norway pretty much chose violence and went ham all over Philippines, as they ended up winning 6-0 against the Philippines here, which was very, very disappointing because the Philippines were undeniably the neutrals' favorite, and I'm pretty sure the tournament's favorite team to root for here because of the sheer passion and joy that we got from watching the team, but also the same that was exuded by the players themselves. And for Norway, I think it was a wake-up call here at this game, and it really did seem like they were playing to the standards that were expected of them. But again, we will have to see, just like with Switzerland, in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup here, to see how far Norway can really go and if they can replicate the same performance against much tougher opposition. Obviously, they might not be able to replicate the scoreline, but if they can have such a dominating performance, I think it'll be a very good sign for the team and for those watching back at home and for the federation itself. And as for the Philippines, they really did put a good account of themselves here at this Women's World Cup. They fought tooth and nail across all three games here, and if they had qualified for the knockout stages, no one would have been surprised given the way the team have played. But it is definitely good and positive signs for the Filipinas here, and hopefully when they go back home, not only will they receive a hero's welcome, but at the same time, they receive the necessary resources to continue to benefit the current team that we have here, but also benefit the football for women and for young footballers in the Philippines itself to just continue to grow and reach the stage again and continue to do better. And hopefully the next time they're at the Women's World Cup, they can either push or even exit out of the group stages and into the knockouts. We finish up with Group H here, which started off with Morocco versus South Korea, with Morocco lining up in a 4-4-1-1 formation and Korea lining up in 3-5-2 formation. And both teams were coming off the back of being defeated. Morocco obviously being hammered 6-0 by Germany here, and Korea just being narrowly beaten out by Colombia, modest 2-0 loss there. But that was besides the point here. Morocco were definitely the favorites going into this match because if you did watch them at the Women's AFCON, Morocco are definitely a team worth watching for now, in the present, and in the future, because the country has invested a lot of its financial resources into developing football for both the men and the women. And on the men's side, we have seen it pay dividends because Morocco did reach the semi-finals of the Men's World Cup. But here, for the women, Morocco did reach the finals of the Women's AFCON here, which they played on home soil. So it was definitely Morocco that was in the driving seat when it came to the odds-on favorites here. And of course, the biggest news going into this game was that Nuhaila Benzina, I really hope I pronounced that correct, became the first ever player to wear a hijab in the Women's World Cup. And that is very historic and is a huge milestone for so many reasons, not only for Muslims, but for women also in the game here, to show there's a lot of inclusivity and acceptance in the game. And I think that this is just the first step of many in the women's game to showing that and to personifying and spreading that message further, not only in this tournament but even for future generations to come. Now overall, this match ended up 1-0 in favor of Morocco because of course it's Morocco. And looking at the game, I do think Morocco, just like they did against Germany, they continued playing their way. They didn't dissuade away from their style of play. It shows a very, very strong mentality in the team and a strong belief in the tactics of the coach. And should results somehow go their way, Morocco managed to advance to the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, I do think they'll give a much better account of themselves, even though they did very well here against Korea, and of course they faced strong opposition in Germany. But I do think should they go to the knockout stages, they'll have an opponent that they can definitely hang with and show the world what Morocco is really made of. And as for Korea, I do think that in spite of the very good tactical play of just trying to press and continue to outwit the opposition when it comes to the physicality of the game, I do think they're missing a lot of technical prowess to really assert themselves on a game that faces an opposition like Morocco. But I think going forward, that's something for them to definitely work on and invest in when it comes to the resources back home in developing the technical abilities of their players. So hopefully going forward, that's something the South Koreans can work on. And we conclude with Group H again, and this time it's Germany vs Colombia, which provided a very thrilling encounter. Germany landed on 4-2-3-1 formation, and Colombia landed on 4-1-2-3 formation here. And going into this match, there was a lot of concern around 18-year-old starlet wonder kid. You really can run out of adjectives to describe her. Linda Caicedo, who had recently collapsed in training here due to what I personally believe was just her being overworked, because she's coming from literally playing domestic football in Spain for Real Madrid and then now just flying off to the World Cup, which is a lot to handle for an 18-year-old. And I think on a general level, there needs to be better management when it comes to her minutes and her well-being, because again, she's only just 18. She is still developing physically, and for someone as young as her to be playing so much football in the space of one calendar year, it can take a huge toll on her body, as we did see this game, as again she did collapse, grabbing her chest as well. And I think that was a very worrying sign when I was watching this game. And I think as football fans in general, we should also be worried, because this is the kind of issues that are facing the players we love to watch, not only on the women's side but also on the men's side, given the huge influx of games that they have to be playing on a weekly basis. So I think a lot of management has to go into Linda Caicedo's minutes again, and I think it's just a general rule across the board for all the players here. They do need to be looked after, not only when it comes to playing on the pitch, but even with stuff like their equipment, because again, we're having a lot of injuries to the women's knees here. We've got a lot of ACL issues that we've talked about in the past on this channel, so there's a lot of care and maintenance that needs to go in the welfare of the players here. But going into the match here, Germany, of course, they scored first, and it looked like the Germans were going to be well on their way to winning, because there were some very golden opportunities that were missed by the likes of Alexandra Pop that should have put the game to bed. But unfortunately, they didn't put them away, and they would come to regret that later on, as of course, who else but Linda Caicedo in the 52nd minute would score an absolute wonder goal, being faced off against 4 defenders. She was literally the piggy in the middle here, but she still found a way out of there, and she scored top bins, and that was a beautiful goal. Another one which should be hanged up in the Louvre alongside the celebration of Oshuala of Nigeria. And of course, then it came to the final goal that guaranteed the victory for Colombia. It came from the 6th minute as Vargas headed home for absolute limbs from the Colombian players and the fans in attendance that game, and I'm sure back home as well. I think definitely going into the knockout stages, as pretty much both Colombia and Germany guaranteed to be qualifying from this group, unless there's some last minute shenanigans that go down the next few days. I think Colombia are definitely the team to watch here. They're going to be a dark horse in the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup. But I do think that they do have the capacity to have a very strong run, and everything willing and permitting, hopefully they can definitely pull off 1 or 2 upsets on their way to maybe just at least the semi-final of the Women's World Cup. And for Germany, for a team that is also in transition, as they're saying goodbye to the likes of Alexandra Pop, as this is surely her last ever Women's World Cup, I do think that it is a good wake-up call for them to just keep on going in terms of the development of the squad and of young players as well. I think Germany, it does have a collective problem in that they are adept with so many technically gifted players, but when it comes to coming with players who can suit a certain position, they do suffer from that, as seen with the men's team, where at the World Cup in Qatar they didn't have a striker, so their goals are really lacking. And then it's the same here for the women's team. There really isn't an heir, in my opinion, to Alexandra Pop, and I think that's something that needs to be sorted out should the women avoid the same calamity that the men are currently going through. And that will do it for the recapping of match days 10 and 11 here of the Women's World Cup. This video is quite long, I do acknowledge that, but what can you do when you're trying to cram in so many games in as short a time as possible? But there will be some more games on display today. Today there's going to be some good games in my opinion. We're obviously going to have Morocco taking on Colombia, and there's going to be Germany taking on Korea. And obviously the more enticing match in my opinion, and I think the general consensus on this is that it's going to be Morocco versus Colombia. I do expect at the very least a draw, obviously with both teams scoring, or Colombia possibly coming out with a win. But you never know, Morocco could cause an upset here. But other than that, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in a few hours when I review and look at the things that we learned from both the Morocco and Colombia game and the Germany vs South Korea game. Thank you very much for watching.